Hi, it's Nancy at Sipping and Painting Hampden. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to paint a very quick little painting called Poppy Bouquet. It's pretty easy. You will need white, black, red, blue, and yellow paint. You'll also need a canvas. I'm using a 16 by 20 pre-primed. It's just the cheapy stuff you get at Michael's, the canvas that is. And regular paints, I'm using a small, medium, and large brush. Small round, medium flat, large flat. But as long as you have a variety of brushes, you should be able to pull this off with whatever you have. All right, thanks, and here we go. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to moisten my canvas with a little bit of water. I'm painting in Denver, it's very dry here, and paint dries out very quickly. If you don't have, well, you should have a brush and water. You do need a water jar. You also need some napkins handy. If you have a spray bottle, you can also just put water on your spray bottle. That's easy. Here's the painting we're doing, by the way. Isn't that lovely? Just orange poppies, pretty easy. All right, so I'm just going to spray on some water. So either of those techniques work. At any time, if my paints dry out, I'm just going to add a little bit of water and mix it in, and it'll be fine. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load up on some blue paint, and I'm just going to paint the whole background blue. Super easy, super easy. Just real easy. And I'm using up and down strokes because this painting has up and down strokes. Now, the fact that I put a little water in my canvas before I did this means that the paint is thin, but it's not so thin that it's dripping, and that's exactly how I like my paint. I like it a little bit thin, and that way it will dry quickly. In Denver, it takes 5 or 10 minutes for acrylic paint to dry. Where you live, it may take longer if you're in a more humid place. I don't have my canvas secured at the top for a good reason. I needed to paint the top of that. If you paint all the way down and around on your canvas, the sides and the top and the bottom, then that's called a gallery wrap, and then you can hang it on the wall without a frame. So that's nice. That's why I don't secure my painting at the top before I get started. And then when I'm finished, I'll put a quick coat of paint on the bottom as well. And so by having the paint all around the canvas, it creates its own little frame because there's no unfinished sides. All right, so I'm just using vertical stripes up and down to paint that background. And if it's streaky, that's good. I want it streaky because this original is streaky. I'm also going to add a little bit of black in a moment after I get some blue paint all over it. I'm going to add a little bit of black to my paint so I have black and blue streaks for this background. Orange and blue look really nice next to each other because they're contrasting colors, meaning they're on opposite sides of the color wheel. And so anytime you have two colors that are on opposite sides from each other on the color wheel, they tend to look really nice together. So blue and orange is one of those combinations. If they're directly across from each other on the color wheel, they complement each other. It's real nice. They go well together. It's like opposites attract, right? When you're dating. Okay. So I have blue all over, but I'm not going to worry about it being perfectly covered because I like those white streaks in it, and I'm going to be putting in a few black streaks anyway. Okay. So now I'm going to take that same dirty brush and I'm just going to put my brush in a little bit of black, and then I'm going to just streak on some black, but I want to make it so that it's not all over the place on the canvas. It's mostly on the sides, and then I'm going to not pick up too much on my brush. I'm going to just use what I put down on the sides first and pick that up and paint along with it. What I mean is pick up the excess and use it in other parts. Now, if I make the sides a little darker, then that's going to bring my eye to the center, to the focal point where my flowers are. So that's a little trick, just to make the sides a little darker on your paintings, and that will, the sides or the tops or the bottom, so that you can bring your eye up to the focal point. All right, I'm going to let that dry. I'm not going to put on much more. I'm going to let it dry. Now, there's a few ways you can let your paintings dry. You can just keep going over it with a brush, with a dry brush. And what that's going to do is it's just going to, just going up and down, all the way from the top, all the way to the bottom. So if I have any clumps, it's just spreading them out. And any places that are wetter than others, it's just kind of knocking it down. I don't want to overdo that because I don't want to over blend this. I like some black stripes and some blue stripes, but if I do it a little bit, I'm just knocking down any clumps to smooth it out. When the paint is nice and smooth, it will dry more quickly rather than having big clumps in it somewhere. So that's one way to dry it. Another way to dry it is you could put it in front of a fan. We have a couple of fans here at the studio. We use them all the time. We also use blow dryers. Personally, I don't really think they're necessary in a dry climate because I'm in Denver and the paint dries really quickly. I just pick my canvas up and then I just wave it around the room a while. And it's kind of fun in my classes too. We usually play real upbeat, kind of loud music while in between instructions. It's a party atmosphere for sure. And I'll just pick up my canvas and dance around with it a bit, wave it around, and it dries pretty quickly that way. Like I said, in Denver, it only takes about 5 or 10 minutes for acrylic paint to dry. But it also depends on how thick you have that paint on. If you have clumps of paint, like if you've been painting with a knife, I love to paint with knives. But if you've been painting with painter's knives instead of a brush, you tend to put it on really thick, and that will take longer. But if you put it on thin, then it should dry pretty quick. So you can do that with paper plate. Here's my other canvas, and this is how I do it. I just pretend this is my wet one. And I just wave it around, I dance around, we turn up the music, and we have a silly old time waving around our canvases to the music, and it's great fun. All right, so I want this to dry quickly. I do have a class that's starting in a little while, an in-person class. So I promised you this would be a quick little painting, so I'm gonna have it dry as quickly as I can. I'm going to give this just a few more minutes, and I'm going to go set up some easels for my class that starts in about an hour, and I'm going to give this about 5 minutes. So this is a good opportunity for you to clean your brushes, definitely clean your brush in the water. If you need to get up and get a beverage or let the dog out, this is a good time to do it, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Hi again. Okay, the way you'll know if your painting is still wet is you will see a shine on it. Let me pick this up real quick and show you. We had one of our teachers here, says the funniest thing. She says you'll know it's wet if you pick it up and rub it on the person next to you and they scream at you. That's one way. I don't recommend that way. Another way is if you move it around in front of a light and you see shimmering or shininess, that means it's still wet. So this has a few more minutes to go. So we're just going to give that a few more minutes. At this point, I can definitely paint the bottom and the sides with my blue or your black. Doesn't really matter. It just creates a nice finish to the painting to have the tops and sides and bottom painted, so you don't need a frame. Okay. That was the bottom. And you don't have to be real neat about the sides. They don't have to match the front exactly, just so long as they're covered in same colors. You can see there's just a little bit of shimmer in there. So I'm waiting just a few minutes for that shimmer to go away. Let's talk about the colors in this painting. Again, I said on your palette you should have red, white, blue, black, and yellow. Those are the three primary colors, plus black and white. And in order to make this orange, we're going to need to mix our paints. So to get that orange, I'm going to take some of my yellow, I'm going to take some of my red, and I'm going to lift and smash it down together. You can swirl it however you want. And the more red you put in, the more red your orange will be. And the more yellow, the brighter your orange will be. Now, save some of your yellow, of course, because we're going to be mixing some of that yellow in with blue to create green. So I have a little bit of, I don't want to take more than half of my yellow if I can help it, because I do need some of it for the green. Maybe I can take, I'll definitely take half though, because I want that orange to be pretty bright. Okay, good. Now, I'm always going to wash my brushes really good. I don't want any bad surprises. Any happy accidents, I guess. Sometimes happy accidents are happy and sometimes they're like, All right, so I'm also going to pick up some blue and I'm going to put it over here near my yellow, and I'm just going to be careful not to get it in my white. And I'm going to mix some blue into yellow to make green. Yellow plus blue make green. Yellow plus red make orange. All right. The more blue you put in, the deeper the green. The more yellow, the brighter the green. All right, so I have an orange, I have a green, I have a yellow, I have a blue, and I have a red. All right. So this is pretty dry now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my medium brush. Make sure your brushes are nice and clean, okay? Make sure they're good and clean. I'm going to pick up some white and I'm going to sketch in my flowers. Okay, so I've got a lot of white on my medium brush and I'm just going to sketch in my flowers. Now, poppy is like a shamrock shape. And I'm just going to sketch it in. The petals are kind of squared at the end, kind of. All right, and this poppy up here, it's going to have a heart-shaped petal top. And then the one next to it's going to be a little bit rounder because you're seeing those petals from different angles, so they're going to take on slightly different shapes. I hope that makes sense. So there's 2 of them. Now they're going to all overlap, of course, and that's fine. We just want to sketch them on so that we can see where they're going to be. And I'm using white because I can always just paint right over white if I make big mistakes. Now this flower has 3 petals. So I'm going to make 3 petals on that one. These 2 have 4, these have 3. And notice how they're not perfectly round petals. They're kind of flat on the top, or even indented a tad. Now this one over here, oops, that's okay. I can put greenery over there. Not to worry. If you make a mess, don't worry, you can always paint over it. All right. So here, this one has a shape that kind of looks like an eggplant on the end. And then it has an ear sticking out of it. Why? I don't know. But that's basically seeing the flower from another side. I hope that makes sense. So this is like the ear or butterfly on that side. And then this one up here has a shape, that's like a bee. And this one, I don't know how to describe that. It's a flattened O, I guess. They don't have to be perfect. That's the thing. This one I'm going to put like an upside down heart. This one down here. And then it's going to have a lobe off of it. And then that leaves me with one down here. I'm not going to tell you what my first thought was on that one, but it has 3 parts. So 1 part, 2 part, 3 part. There you go. So those are my petals, sorry, my flowers. And then I'm also going to put some stems. Now by putting this in white, it's going to make it easier for me to paint over it and not have all that blue and black show up. So it's also just giving me kind of a sense of where everything's going to be laying. Now notice that paint wasn't entirely dry, so that's why it came up that way. Now I'm going to take my medium brush and I'm going to just use it to swirl in white paint, and then I'm going to have to let that dry. But the rest of my painting is pretty dry, so that white paint will have something to rest on and should dry fairly quickly. Notice how I didn't take too long fussing over it. I just went for it because however your shapes are, as long as they're orange and then you put in petals, it's going to look like a flower. So don't fuss too much. You can always start and stop this video, but don't fuss too much over the exact shapes. It's just not necessary. It will look like a flower. You put leaves and a stem on it, on each one, and bingo, it's going to look like some kind of flower. And hopefully we're going to have people guess poppies. The fact that they're orange really starts to say poppy. Poppies are a beautiful thing to paint as a gift for someone who's a veteran, because Veterans Day has poppies as a symbol. So down here with these stems, if you want to put them in, you can, but you really don't have to. I think I'll there you go. Green is a mix of yellow and blue, so I don't have to worry too much about exactly what I have there. All right, so it's still wet, but I don't care. I'm gonna see on the ones that are the driest, I want to see what this orange looks like. I'm just gonna test it. Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. The white underneath it gave it something to rest on. That made it a pretty bright orange. I'm not unhappy with that. Are there any more that are mostly dry that I could try that again? Let's see. And notice how I'm using my big brush because I'm not real concerned right now if I'm doing it perfectly. But you know what, if you don't have a lot of experience painting and you want to be slower and more careful, use your small brush. And we're going to be going over this orange after it dries a bit, so maybe I'll just let my white dry a little bit more anyway. All right. I just get excited about painting, and I think if there was a park bench with wet paint, it said wet paint, I'd probably sit on it. Because I like to think everything's dry. But if you're really a perfectionist, turn off the video, just wait a few minutes and make sure. I'm not. I'm just going to keep on plugging away. Like I said, I promised you this would be a quick little painting. I'm having some fun with it. Now you can let this orange dry and then you can come back in and put on another layer of it. Right now that orange is pretty bright because it's mixing with my white. But if you don't want it to mix with your white, if you want a more true orange, let that white dry. Notice I'm not being very, very careful, and I'll tell you why. This painting is loose, and what I mean by loose is it's not supposed to be an exact representation of flowers, of poppies. It's supposed to definitely look like poppies, but it's a little more impressionistic. When you look at real poppies, you're not going to see exactly these lines in exactly those places, okay? It's impressionistic paintings approximate what you're viewing, but they don't exactly replicate it. That would be realism. We don't paint a lot of realism because we want to have fun and relax, and a very realistic painting would take a long time. Lots of detail. So I'm just going to let that dry a bit. I'm going to come back and put on another layer. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to go grab the foam. Yeah, I did. I'm taking a class right now. Well, what did you mean? Anytime someone calls like that, tell them to email me and say, I always want a paper trail. Okay. All right, I'll look at it tomorrow. All right, unless you want to put it together for me in an email, that would be really nice. Okay. Okay, I gotta go. I'm in the middle of taping something. Can we chat when I'm not? Okay, bye. All right. So that's starting to set up a little bit. What I mean by set up is starting to dry a little bit, but it's still pretty wet. I realized there were 4 big flowers and I have 3 big flowers. So I can fix that. Remember, acrylic paint, one of the beautiful things about acrylic paint is that you can fix things. Just let it dry and then paint over it. But I can do this also another way. I can just turn one of these into another petal. No problem. Look at that. And then that means I'm going to put something in white over here first. I can paint another on the side over here. And then let that dry. So now I have the same number as the original. But here's the thing, no one's ever going to see the original. So if yours doesn't look exactly like the original, great. That is absolutely fine. That's what you want, really. You don't want it to look exactly like someone else's work. You want it to look like your work. And so I'm going to mix up a little bit of orange while I'm waiting for that to set up. And again, what I mean by set up is dry. And I'm all alone in the studio here. It's nice and quiet. Normally we play lots of music. In between instructions in our paintings, we play music and it's lots of fun. But because we're videotaping these for YouTube, YouTube does not like copyright violations, so we avoid that altogether by just not playing music. So on your end, while you're letting yours dry, feel free to crank up the tunes and dance around and play music of your own. That's what we really want. That's why we do these on YouTube. We want people to have their own paint parties at home. All right, so I've got a slightly darker orange mix now, and I can look for areas that are drier than others, and I can try it out and see how that, oh, that's nice. Lots of nice coverage on that one. Boom. Wow, bright orange coverage. Holy cow, that's pretty. All right, now remember all these flowers overlap, so don't freak out when they do. That's what they're supposed to do. Boom. Boom. Nice. Beautiful bright orange. Beautiful bright orange. Love that bright orange. I'm using plenty of paint. Again, if you want to go slower and be more exact, use your small brush. I'm using a medium brush, which is kind of a cocky thing to do, I admit. But like I said, I wanted this to be a quick, easy painting and nothing that we're going to fuss too much over. Just a quick, easy little painting. That's still pretty wet. So sometimes if paint is really wet, too wet, and you paint another layer, you'll be picking up the paint rather than putting it down. So I'm going to avoid anything that's soaking wet. That's pretty. This area was too wet, remember? That's what I put on last, so I got to let that set, let it dry a bit. You could not do this with oil. You could not be using wet blue over wet orange and then going back and forth a lot. You'd make a big brown mess. But with acrylic, it dries so fast that I can go over this pretty quickly. And again, you know, depending on your climate, your paint might dry slower. Denver is very dry. It's semi-arid here. I grew up in Michigan, and when people from Michigan ask me what Denver weather is like, I say, if you put Michigan weather and Las Vegas weather in a paper bag, and you mix it all up, you pretty much have Denver. We do get a lot of snow here some winters, and then other winters we don't get any at all. And we only get half the rain that people get in the Midwest. So it's pretty dry here. If you're trying to grow tomatoes, it's a little harder. Real hard to keep your grass green, let me tell you that. Everybody has a sprinkler in the West. You can't grow grass without it. In winter, in Michigan, you just look at grass and it grows, I think. All right, so those flowers overlap in the center, obviously. I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to clean it really well. I want a really clean brush. Okay. Now, remember that green I made? Remember I mixed green by putting together yellow and blue? I'm going to pick up that green. I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to pull it up very carefully. And I'm using my medium brush. Again, if you want to be more delicate and precise, you can use a smaller brush and take more time. I'm pretty confident with my medium brush. I paint a fair amount, so I paint quite a bit actually now. So I'm feeling confident I can do that. Stop just short of the flower. Don't go into the flower. Helps to go. All right, and then one nice way to make like a spear, like if you're making a pickle spear, you just start flat and then pull up and twist your brush. So it's starting flat and then pull up and twist it, and you get a nice spear shape. Now, the reason I did it with those like stripes is I'm going to come back in. I'm not going to clean my brush at all, but I'm going to come back in those middle areas, and I'm going to just put yellow on my brush. And the reason I'm doing that is that way, I'm going to twist it, that way I get those variations in color in my stems without having to fuss too much. So I just put yellow on my dirty brush and then pull up on it. And I'm getting, see how I'm getting those yellow parts in there? I could start at the top and pull down on a few, I guess. But that gives me some nice yellow stems mixed in with my green. And then when I come back in with the black to separate them out, you'll be able to see distinct leaves a little more clearly. And same thing up here, you're gonna have to be real careful in between flowers though. Real careful. You probably want to use a baby brush for that. Real careful on those that are in between. Real careful. Okay. All right. I'm liking it. Hope you're liking it. Now I'm going to have to let this dry a bit before I go back in and put my black details. Now, one other thing I can do is I can add a little bit of white. I didn't even clean my green brush, but I can go and take a little bit of white on top of that green, and I can come in, and those ones that are yellow, I can mix a little bit of white in there too. And that will make them even more distinctly different than the green, the bright green ones, or the green, that's silly, the true green. So that's just an optional thing if you want. Add a little bit of white on your brush, and then go over some of those that are lighter anyway, the ones that are more yellow, and then put a white stripe on them. And that's going to separate those out. So it's very clear that some are much lighter than others. Does that make sense? I hope so. All right, now I'm going to let that dry a bit. I keep saying that and I keep fiddling with it. That's what I do. All right. At some point, you just got to stop fiddling. All right, so I'm going to set that aside, set my brush aside. I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to come back in and put in my black outlines and my yellow highlights. And then we'll be done with the painting. Wasn't that a quick little painting? We don't have a whole lot more to go. One thing I am going to do though, remember that extra part that I put in that was yellow and red, well, it's orange. I want to just give that another layer because it was pretty thin and it wasn't resting on white in some of it. So I got to make sure that's got enough paint. Right now I'm just mixing a little bit more orange on my brush. And then I'm using the baby brush to come in and fix that one a little bit. I just want to make sure that it didn't work too well. That's the part that didn't have the white underpainting, remember? Hi everyone, it's a little bit later. Obviously it's evening. I let my painting dry a little bit, and now I'm going to come back in and I'm going to, first I want to put it over here. So I'm going to come back in, I'm going to put in my highlights and my shadows in this painting, and then we'll be finished. We'll just sign it, we'll be good to go. So here we go. Make sure that light's not shining on you too much. All right, so here's my new paint. So I'm going to pick up my baby brush and my black paint and then chisel it on the side of your plate until you get a point. Because we're going to go ahead and outline these flowers and then these stems, but we're not going to outline all the way around. We're just going to outline in maybe 3/4 of the way. So for example, on this petal, I'm going to come around like a heart, but see, I'm not closing it. I'm going to be kind of loose with my outline. Maybe that one I need a little more pressure, but I want to be loose with the outline so none of this looks too fussy. Because if it looks really fussy, then people are going to be looking for the imperfections. Whereas if I deliberately make it imperfect, it looks like it's supposed to be imperfect. So notice how I'm not doing my outlines perfectly. I'm just doing them loosely. Hope that makes sense. And I'm going to go all the way around my flowers, and I'm going to just imagine where those lines are. Like that. So they're not perfect outlines. Don't make them perfect, because if you make them perfect, then they're going to look like a coloring book. And like I said, people will look for where you messed up. So if you deliberately make them imperfect, then it looks like you intended it that way. So some of these will be outlined completely, and then some maybe not at all, or some just partially. You want to give the suggestions of the shape without really obsessing about the exact shape. I hope that makes sense. Keep it loose, keep it loose. Loose, 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 loose. Does that make sense? All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my large brush and I'm going to use the stick end of it, just the stick, and I'm going to tap that stick into my yellow paint. So I have a little ball of yellow paint, and I'm going to put in a yellow center. Now, the original artist on the original painting that I had didn't have a yellow center in her flowers, and then she made, I added it actually to this one. You can see it a little bit. But she made these black stamens, or whatever they're called, coming out from the center without a center point. And I kind of thought that's difficult. So if I put in a little yellow dot on only on the open flowers and let that dry, then when I come back in and do my black stamens coming out of the center, then I'm going to know exactly where to put them. So I'm going to let that dry for just a minute. I'm going to go in and do the outlines on my stems and leaves. Now let me just tell you about the stems and leaves. Again, we don't want to outline every single one of them perfectly, okay? We want to choose some and then outline them. Again, chisel your black paint so it's thin, and then on the side of your brush, wet it with water and thin it if it's too thick. And I just want to come in and just outline some of these stems, not all of them. If you outline all of them, it's going to look too perfect. And then, like I said, people come in and go, oh, you missed a spot. Whereas if you only put it on some, it'll look like you deliberately are just suggesting where those outlines, where those leaves are. And you don't have to have solid lines all the way down. You could break it up a little bit. Do you see how just having a few lines makes them stand out? So you don't have to go in and make everything perfect. Just have a few. So it suggests where stems are rather than clobbers you over the head with them. I hope that all makes sense. I don't want to overdo it now. I'm starting to overdo it. I'm kind of a perfectionist, so that's can be a hard thing for me to not want to outline everything perfectly, but you get the idea. Okay, good. Now keep that paint thin. Add a little water if you need that black paint. Okay, and then be sure you're chiseling it on the side of the plate. You want it to be like ink, and you want this to be a sharp point. Now I'm going to take a deep breath and be slow and careful, and I'm going to come out from this yellow dot. I'm not going to touch the dot, and I'm going to put these curved stamen lines. In general, on a big petal, it's about 3 of them. If it's a small petal, you might want to do 2 of them, suggesting that maybe there's something else. Now this one's folded over so that it doesn't have any of those. It's only these ones that are open that we're going to put them in. They're kind of like little whiskers. You can make them long or short. It doesn't really matter. Just take your time and do it slow. And whatever you do, start from the center and flick out. If you've worn mascara before, it's kind of like putting on mascara. It just is a little flick. If you haven't worn mascara, maybe watch somebody do it. And these are, like I said, these are those, I think they're called stamens. Stamens or pistils? I don't really know. I'm not a botanist and I don't pretend to know this stuff, but it seems to me stamen is a word that in botany. Whatever these are. Maybe they're little creases on the petals too. I'm not exactly sure. But I know the painting looks nice when you have them in there. So I'm not actually touching that yellow dot. I'm coming close to it. I don't want to contaminate it with the black paint because it's yellow and that'd be kind of tricky to fix that. But anyway, that's that. I did have a stem up here, so I'm going to make a little line on part of it, I guess. All right, so that is my painting. I am finished. And, oh, no, I'm not. Let me show you one more thing. False alarm. Okay, there's my baby brush again. I cleaned it really well. I'm gonna put it in my yellow paint. And make sure you swish that yellow paint around really well. Make sure that brush is clean. Clean your brush well. I didn't clean it enough, and now I've got some almost greenish yellow, but that's okay. It's still gonna do the trick. Okay. What I want to do now is take that yellow. I'm gonna chisel my brush on the side. That's what happens if I go too fast. I gotta slow down. Breathe. Drink my wine. Okay. Chiseling, chiseling. Now, this is the last step, besides signing my name, of course. I'm going to highlight areas of my petals, but I'm going to go inside that black, not on top of it, but inside. And I'm not going to be perfect about how I highlight these. I want it to look kind of random. It's not completely outlined. Just like our black wasn't completely outlined, this is even more so, okay? And it's just gonna give some dimensionality, I think that's a word, to our flowers. It's gonna add just a little highlight to those petals where they bend. And I don't want it to be too perfect. Perfection is the enemy of art. That's my motto. That's what I say so that I don't have to make anything look too good. It's a little joke. All right, so I am just adding a little bit of that highlight color in there. Pop, pop, there you go. Make this sound. All right, I think I have a little bit on all the petals. I think I'm good to go. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a color, any color, and I am going to sign my name at the bottom. I'm going to do the bottom right. You can do wherever you want. I'm going to put my initials right down here at the bottom. And see, that's who I am. And that's your painting. I hope you enjoyed painting this bouquet of poppies with me. Yeah. Thanks for coming and painting with me today. And I hope that you'll check us out for more videos of painting classes at Sipping and Painting Hampden. And please, if you enjoyed painting with me today, like and subscribe down there. Like it, subscribe, and then you'll get notifications about all of the painting classes that we're loading. And we're doing them quickly. We have 500 paintings in this studio, and it's my goal, since we're kind of locked down for the pandemic, it's my goal to get them all painted. Yay! So join me again, okay? Like and subscribe. Join me again. I'll see you another day. Thanks so much. Cheers.